Good morning. I don't usually do this, but these next 3 weeks are going to be very different. And I wanted to start by introducing them a little bit. If you look at your syllabus, I'm sorry, my camera is shaking because literally I'm sitting here in my bedroom on my bed because there's a white wall behind me and one of my dogs just jumped up on the bed. So if we get a little shaking, we know that's what's going on. So at any rate, I want to just talk a little bit about these 3 weeks. These 3 weeks are about ethical engagement. We've been talking about ethics. We've used the teleological and deontological and virtue lenses to think about ethics. But now we're going to talk about how we can actually be ethical in our connections with other people, particularly in the difficult ones, the conflict. So I'm setting up a little conflict. It's actually a real story. It's happening here in Arizona where I live and has been for a number of years. And actually at the point in which you enter the story, in real life, the story has already gone quite a ways past where I have created the case for you. And you are free to look it up if you'd like and see what's going on. But the more important thing is that we think about the ways in which we engage around conflict. And this 3 weeks we have a chance to do that. I've started you out with a listening exercise. And if anybody doesn't have a partner, then I suggest that you glom on to a group that already has two and make a third. It's not my preference. It doesn't work the best way that way, but if for some strange reason we have an odd number of people in a class, then that's the best thing to do, and then everybody just take a turn. So let's talk a little bit about why I would start a conflict session with listening skills. That may seem kind of obvious on the face of it, but I want to talk about active listening. The reality is we only hear between 50 and maybe 75 at best % of everything that is thrown at us when we're supposed to be listening. And I'm not talking about being bombarded by media. I'm really talking about like right now when you're supposed to be listening to this video, or when you are talking to a friend, or you're at work and a coworker or your boss is talking to you. Literally, you only get 50 to 75% of it. So let's just think about, why does that happen? Well, how many times have you been, listening to somebody and something that they say catches your interest and your brain goes off down some path to think about that particular thing. Meanwhile, they were continuing their conversation that way. And until you realize that you've checked out and are having your own conversation with yourself, you don't bring yourself back around to that particular conversation, and you've missed something. How many of you are ever annoyed by someone's mannerisms and you stop listening and start focusing on the mannerisms, or let them distract you? I know that I am. How many of you have ever been in a situation where you didn't like what the person was saying and you start rebutting them in your head? Again, you're very busy rebutting. They're down the road with their conversation. There are like 5 or 10 things that we do. Daydream, think about what we want for dinner, something more interesting that is going on around us. And all of these reasons lead us to not actually fully hear. And fully hearing, focusing on what someone is telling us, is just step one. If you find that you're a person who has trouble fully listening, then I suggest that you find something to a coping mechanism to help you stay focused. The one that works for me, and as a lawyer, I had to not miss a word that my client said, was to take notes the whole time that I was listening and discussing. There's something about the note-taking activity for me that helped me stay present in the conversation. Maybe that will work for you. Okay, so that's just step one in active listening. Active listening requires us to literally focus on the person. I have a hard time right now talking to the camera because it's just a little webcam dot. It used to be that when I would do this in the beginning, I had such a hard time that I had to put these kind of distractions. I had to put a stuffed animal on top of my computer. That was back in the days when I was actually using a desktop computer and the monitor was actually wide enough to put a little stuffed bear up there so that I could at least feel like I was talking to somebody. Now I'm a little bit more comfortable with this. But the point is, need eye contact. And so I'm hoping that you will absolutely do this virtually. You will use Facebook video camera or Google Hangout with the video camera, and not just by phone, and absolutely not by chat. Chat's not okay. And actually nothing but video will work for this exercise. So the first thing you guys are going to need to do is figure out with your partner what video function you want to use. Okay, so that's thing one. You're going to make eye contact, and you're going to also be active in your listening. When you hear something that you don't understand, you're not going to just let it go in your mind and hope that sooner or later the person will get back to the thing that you do understand. Or even if you're just not sure, you're going to say, excuse me, do you mind if I get some clarification on what you just said? Or I'm not sure I understood you, that part about XYZ. Do you think you could try again, because I'm not exactly following? Active listening means really doing what you need to do to get the information that is being given to you. And the other thing that it involves is more than just actively getting clarification. It's helping the person who's talking to you tell their whole story. So when they're done, you want to ask clarifying questions, or you want to ask additional questions that maybe get to the details. So if they've told you something about a dynamic in a family relationship, you might want to ask, has this person always been like this, or was there something going on in that period of time that changed their behavior, that was impacting their behavior? Just things like that. And then the other thing you want to do to help people know that you're listening is you want to paraphrase or reframe what they've said in your own words so that they know that you're following. So for example, if someone is telling you a story of the way that they were treated by their boss, what you might want to say to them is, so you got to work that day and that's when it all started. In other words, so that they know that you're actually paying attention. There is something wonderful and warm and makes you feel really credible and validated when somebody, when you realize that somebody is, leaning forward a little bit, really giving you eye contact, and actually is paying good attention. And these are the techniques. And the last one is empathy. We all know what empathy means, but it's a little harder to practice. And to go back to my example of the boss and whatever it was that started, of course, I'm making all this up. Somebody tells you a story, and your empathy basically goes like this. So when you did that work, and then your boss actually took credit for it to his boss, oh my gosh, if that happened to me, I would just be angry. I would be so mad, and I would feel frustrated, and I'm sure you must have been very frustrated. In other words, you are basically helping your empathy level is where they are, and you match empathy for empathy. Now, what you don't want to do, and this is really not good listening, what you don't want to do is say, oh, that happened to me too, and then start telling your story. This is their time, not your time, and so you don't want to do that. And I know that a lot of us do that when we are talking with friends and we're sharing and swapping stories, and that's okay. But when you are trying to listen for conflict, that is not what you want to do. Usually in a conflict situation, when a conflict is being facilitated, the facilitator gives everybody a chance to talk. Now, another thing that might come up in a conflict is that you hear somebody else telling the story that you are part of and you don't believe they're telling it correctly, or you think they are misrepresenting you. The thing to do in that case is to write down what you hear them saying so that they can finish and get through what they have to say and you don't forget anything. What we tend to do is to butt in, sometimes start talking over the person, because we do not want everybody to think that what they just heard is an accurate story. So it doesn't hurt you at all. In fact, it makes you look more reasonable if you wait till they're done, and then when it's your turn, you basically say, I need to clarify a few things because the facts that Mr. So-and-so just gave you are actually not true in full. There are places where his facts need some correction. And then you just go and you've just basically said that the other guy doesn't have the full story, and you've given yourself credibility in a very reasonable way as opposed to talking over that person. Okay, so those are your clues for active listening. Now, when we get to the point where we are actually having our discussion, we're going to be on the discussion board, so it won't actually be virtually, but you're going to be paying close attention to what people say. You're going to be looking for the nuances. You're going to be looking for where the feelings are, where the hot buttons are, where the values are, and you will already be able to spot those values. So what you should be doing this week is following through with your listening exercise and taking the time to watch all of those videos so that next week's work, when we get to it, you will be ready for it. You will have already thought about it. So I want to tell you that this can be a very interesting and very fun exercise, and I hope that you all have a good time with it. If you have any questions at all about what you're supposed to be doing, please don't hesitate to send me an email. Okay, these are our last 3 weeks together, and let's make them fun. You guys have been very great. You're very thoughtful, and I've really appreciated being able to read through all of your stuff. Have a great week, and I will see you on the discussion board.